Hi, I'm Shama Sawant, a member of Socialist Alternative in the United States.
Jag heter Livia från Rättvisepartiet Socialism i Sverige.
I'm a member of Socialist Alternative in England, Wales and Scotland.
Soy Mauro de Alternativa Socialista en México.
I'm Amel Dosivey from Workers' and Socialist Party.
Ich bin Janine von der Sozialistischen Alternative.
I'm a member of the Socialist Party in Ireland.
I'm Natasha from Greece.
Olá, eu sou Jane Barros, sou militante da LSR, Liberdade, Socialismo e Revolução.
We, as members of the working class and as socialists in America, are fighting against Trump's right-wing regime.
Fighting sectarian division and building working class unity, our members are organised north and south and recently played a big role in the victorious workers' occupation of the Harland and Wolff shipyard.
Estamos trabajando para construir una alternativa socialista para los trabajadores y para la juventud.
Στο ξεκίνημα παλεύουμε ενάντια στις επιθέσεις της κυβέρνησης στα εργατικά και στα δημοκρατικά δικαιώματα.
E faço parte da luta com milhares de brasileiros e brasileiras que estão na linha de frente para lutar contra o governo Bolsonaro.
We are currently campaigning to have, self-organizing a gender strike on issues of national minimum wage, unemployment.
We're currently campaigning and protesting against the hated Boris Johnson Tory government.
Vi jobbar också för att tillsammans med unga formulera revolutionära socialistiska svar på utmaningarna som klimatkampen.
As many of you might already know, we just won a historic re-election campaign in Seattle, fighting against the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, Amazon Corporation, and Seattle's big business.
We're International Socialist Alternative, fighting capitalism and for socialism in over 30 countries around the world.
Hi, I'm Shama Sawant, a member of Socialist Alternative.
no, PPE, safety kits. There was nothing on pay in terms of hazard pay. Basically, we were just out on our own in these grocery stores all over the country. And Instacart is doing less than nothing for their workers. So what this flowed out of was a bit of organizing that's been going on with the independent contractors called full service shoppers. And they've been organizing on Facebook for years. They've got an organized core of about 15,000 workers on a closed Facebook group. And that organization, when you sort of combine that with the coronavirus, with the pandemic, it was just gasoline on a fire. And in the tens of thousands, people are not shopping. People have deactivated their app and they're not using it. It's uneven in different parts of the country, places like Wisconsin, Arizona, Florida, California. It seems to be really strong. The way that we know that is that we have screenshots from the Facebook group in the app where just like as many as 50 orders in certain regions are available for pickup and no one is taking them. There are reports from grocery stores that are saying things like, what is going on at Instacart? We have a stack of deli orders that we've pre-prepared that we're going to have to throw out because no one is coming in to pick them up. That means the strike is happening, and the strike is strong in many parts of the country. And like I said, this is day 6. For my part in this, the employees, the in-store shoppers, really weren't supposed to go on strike. They weren't really included with the full service shoppers. But because conditions are so brutal, and there is no talk of any relief coming from Instacart, in places like Florida, here in Chicago, Boston, these shoppers are going on strike with the full service shoppers. And out of that, we are trying to coordinate with the union, UFCW, to launch a national union drive of the employees that are Instacart workers. And that's been my focus the last week. I've connected with workers from Florida, different parts of Florida, from Texas, from Seattle, from California, from Boston. And it's just this momentum of the strike has been so remarkable that now these organizing opportunities are wide open. Because working class people are absolutely fed up, especially the essential frontline workers are coming together and fighting back. And this is the last thing I'll say. We've already won our first concession. Instacart is offering safety kits that include a mask, that include gloves, that include hand sanitizer. And that is clearly because of the pressure of the strike, which is outstanding. At the same time, we're not sure how many of these safety kits are actually going to be produced, when they're going to be provided, and if it's going to be a one-off. Are they only going to give workers the safety kit one time, or do we get them monthly, bi-weekly? We have no idea. We don't know. And of course, there's been no talk of concessions on pay, on paid sick leave. It's really atrocious, the paid sick leave that you have now. You have to have tested positive for coronavirus to get 2 weeks quarantine pay. And if the only way you can test positive for coronavirus in the US is if you're dying or rich. So there's it's this closed feedback loop that workers can't access. And it's atrocious. And it's one of the key factors in why the strike has happened. So overall, I mean, it's a really fast moving, dynamic situation, but it shows the potential of working class people and what we can do when we get organized and we fight back.
Thanks, Ryan. That's super exciting. I didn't realize that the strike was going on this long. That's amazing and very inspiring. I mean, in the US in 2018, we saw the teachers going on strike and we saw waves of that throughout the US. Can you talk a little bit more how it's changed more towards essential workers that are taking action? And can you talk about maybe how we can link these actions up across the US?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way we've seen essential workers move into struggle in just the past few weeks has been absolutely remarkable. I mean, places like Hanes, GM, Amazon here in Chicago, they've walked out of the warehouse, I believe, 4 times in the last 10 days or something like that. There was a huge walkout yesterday morning, and a caravan of cars were lined up to meet them in solidarity. It was a really powerful moment. And we absolutely need to link up these struggles, need to link up amongst Amazon workers, Instacart workers, the rest of the gig economy, the rest of essential workers. I know there are things happening in the US with that. Amazon workers, Uber and Lyft drivers, and Instacart strikers are going to be running a coordinated like social media blitz on Monday. And that's a starting point for potentially much more like dynamic organizing in the future. And it's absolutely crucial. I mean, frontline workers, the brunt of this crisis is being put on our backs. And it's absolutely crucial that we get organized and we bring as many workers into the struggle as possible to win what we desperately need in our workplaces and in wider society.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Ryan is a member of the International Socialist Alternative, again in Chicago. And if you agree with the type of work that he's doing, organize the unorganized, please consider donating to our organization so we can keep this type of work going and really spread the message of Instacart workers and our most vulnerable essential workers in general. Next, we're going to go to Russia with Tasya, who is an organizer with the Virus Trade Union. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it came to be?
Hello, comrades. I'll tell you about our Virus Trade Union. Putin has declared a national month holiday in effect a quarantine, but so far he is afraid to use this word because it would mean declaring a national emergency. According to Russian law, that means that he would have to make a lot of payments to the population from the state's reserve fund. Although he first declared that the holiday was for all, he then decreed that the companies who produced and distribute necessary items should continue working, but full protective gear should be provided. Where possible, workers should work from home. He promised that those who were laid off during the quarantine would be compensated, but this only applies to those officially registered. That means that migrant workers, even from other cities, won't be paid. He promised business interest free credit to pay their workers. Of course, the employers are using any means to cut costs. Some have immediately sacked staff. Others have refused to release workers into quarantine. Some, like the fashion shops La Moda and Wildberries, started selling a few bottles of sanitizer and masks that their work is essential. Others allowed their workers to go into quarantine but forced them first to agree to take unpaid leave. Workers who are legally still working do so without proper protection, which is impossible to buy in chemists except at extortionate prices. Many families with children were in an even worse position at schools and kindergartens shut. Many women have had to take their children to work. Two of our comrades tried to persuade their employer to let them work at home. They both denied there was a virus and claimed it was all an American information attack. After Putin's declaration, they were sent home to work. The unions that do exist are completely bureaucratized and do nothing. So we set up the Virus Trade Union. We announced it on the social networks. We contacted those who applied to discuss their problem. If the company is not producing essential goods, we help them to write to the labor inspectorate, or it working without PPE, we help them to contact the consumer safety body. If people have been sacked illegally or forced to take unpaid leave, we write complaints and publicize the company in the social networks, sometimes in the mainstream media. But most importantly, we try and unite people who contact us from the same company or who do similar jobs to organize a trade union with advice on how to do it. So far, in just 10 days, we have had 254 requests for help, every day more coming. We have a large number of requests from merchandisers, people who fill shelves for companies like Danone, Ferrera, Nestlé, PepsiCo, Philip Morris, and Lina. We have helped them set up a WhatsApp group and are actively encouraging them to set up a general trade union. We have helped them to draft a charter of rights, which has so far been ready by 1,500 people. Already several companies have started to provide protective gear. We have also won a victory at Wildberries. 40 minutes after publicizing the situation, management retreated from their earlier demand that staff should start using their own vehicles to deliver goods or deliver on food. Things are very bad in healthcare organizations. In many places, there's no PPE. Doctors in one hospital contacted us. The chief doctors had told dentists and others that either they go on unpaid leave or they would have to work in the coronavirus ward. Workers on St. Petersburg metro were told they would work, but then pressure was put on to take unpaid leave or their annual leave allocation instead. They were told it's better to stay home than get infected. We are looking after your health. I'm sorry. Only after many had signed the letter was it announced that there would be national holiday. There are 1,700 workers on metro. Imagine how many families left without pay. What next? Our main task is to politicize the workplaces, set up new trade union cells that act not just during the quarantine but after. We understand there will be little help from the inspection bodies. They decide after 30 days and people need help now. Far more effective is publicity, exposing business hypocrisy. This happened with Wildberries, and when the information gets out, it encourages others to speak out. People understand they are not alone and that there are others who are not afraid to take action. This really helps to politicize people and strengthen solidarity. We hope that after this, we can establish in different companies and sectors trade union cells for the future of people who have fought together and will continue fighting for the rights of the working class. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is so inspiring, being able to connect all of these workers who are not organized with other people that are experiencing the same types of, oppressive work conditions that they're experiencing. That's so powerful. Maybe just for a brief moment, can you talk a little bit about the repressive measures that the Putin regime is implementing?
Yes, of course. Not long before the quarantine, they passed a new law to make the spreading of fake news a criminal offense. And when the virus appeared, they set up a special body to control fake news about the coronavirus. Now, if a court thinks that news is fake, you can be fined up to 8,500 euros or 3 years in prison, or even 5 years if it is about the coronavirus. Fake, of course, is anything that differs from the position of the Ministry of Health or other authorities. The first person to suffer under this is head of a new medical workers union who warned that the test being used probably underestimated cases in Russia. Now they have passed laws against violating quarantine. They used this against a group of activists from this union, arresting them as they were traveling to the Novgorod region to deliver personal protection equipment to local medical personnel. Their leader was physically attacked during their arrest, and they were all fined. Now they use the excuse of the need to trace people who are ill and giving our grants to develop special apps and install many video cameras for face recognition systems to track people's movement. These have already been used against political protests. International Socialist Alternative is against the use of such crisis, any emergency situation by the state as an excuse to tighten the screws. Measures such as a quarantine are now needed in this crisis because they failed to react quickly with mass testing and because the health system has been destroyed by austerity and privatization, but tough measures are needed. Then the workers themselves should decide what safety measures are needed to protect their health, in what situations they should be used, and for how long they should last.
Thank you so much. If this type of work is something that you're interested in or you're organizing in your country, if you want to get involved, please check out our International Socialist Alternative website and join with us so you can unite as well with all of these other movements and workers across the country and across the world. Next, we're going to go to London with Danny. Danny, can you talk about some of the successful strikes that we're having over in Britain? My man, can you come off mute, please? Nice. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah, just, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're all set. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think first we have to send condolences to 5 of my fellow Unite members who work in the bus industry. So 3 drivers and 2 of the controllers passed away over this weekend. And this highlights why we need to fight for health and safety, and why we need to fight for the rights of workers. Because it will be the low-paid workers, what have now been highlighted as critical workers. I represent 2,200 workers who work in local government, and that's over 2 districts, Bexley, which is a Conservative Tory council, and Greenwich, which is a Labour council. We got involved when 150 refuse workers, sanitation workers came into our branch working at the Bexley depot, and it was an outsourced privatised company, Serco, which you may have heard of, who were running that. At the start, about 4 months ago, we had about 50 members. There was terrible conditions there. The lowest pay was £8.90 an hour. That compares, if you do a similar job in Greenwich, of £13 an hour. A 42-hour week, as opposed to in Greenwich, which is an in-house service, which was a 35-hour week. In Greenwich, you would get sick pay, full sick pay for 6 months, half sick pay for the following 6 months, so 12 months of a very decent sick pay. In Bexley Serco, people would perhaps get it for 3 days. Then also some of them would only get the statutory sick pay of £94 a week. So we organised there, me and a few of the Unite organisers, and we got the membership up to something like 130. We balloted, and then we set strikes for the 18th and 19th of 20th March. The strikes became very competitive. The police were called. I was issued with what's called a Section 14, which is what if you saw all these Extinction Rebellion people, that's what they get arrested on. And when we pointed out some was on private land, they threatened to arrest us on the 1826 Vagrantry Act. But the workers had gained such confidence that we actually blockaded the only 3 SCAD wagons that were going out. We physically stopped them from going. We negotiated with the police, and it became clear that they were never going to arrest any of us. So they were the next strike days were organised for the 25th, and that was obviously just before the lockdown. But what came clear was that the company were only going to pay statutory sick pay for isolation. So then we used, because we're already on strike, we forced that through, and we won. which is a tremendous victory where all workers will receive that isolation if they're on isolation of full pay. But also this had a ripple effect across Unite and other depots in Medway, Thurrock. They took unofficial action on the basis of health and safety regulations. So it was too safe, not safe enough to go. Bear in mind, these people are working 3 to a cab. The cab's 6 foot by 6 foot, or a metre by metre, collecting the waste and household waste. Imagine the danger they're in. But it was clear victory. But also, what we have noticed is a lot of the strikes or walkouts are all unofficial. In the Bexley Circa, we wrote to the management last week again saying that we will, if necessary, initiate strike action even during this crisis. Because obviously the workers are going in and they're doing an even more dangerous job. We've asked for a hazard payment of £750 straight away, harmonisation of all the wage scales and increases as soon as possible. So again, but the workers are prepared to go out on strike again. The wider strikes will be unofficial because, in a way, most strikes, because of the trade union bill and the reluctance of the Electoral Reform Society to do postal ballots, in effect, there has been a ban on strikes. But I believe there'll be more and more unofficial strikes. I think also the mistaken belief by the trade union leaders, people like Len McCluskey and Francis O'Grady have been praised by Johnson, Gove and Hancock, Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Health Secretary. And sorry, Gove's not the Chancellor, but anyway, but they've all been given praise. And it's almost this false narrative that somehow, just because of COVID-19, that the workers and the bosses are now have the same interests. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. And I think while in organising workplaces there will be some fight back, but not a great deal. But I think the anger is building up because even the last 2 weeks, 1 million people signed on to claim welfare benefits. I mean, I know the figure in America was something like 6 million, wasn't it, in a few weeks? But obviously they will then find out in the universal credit, people will realise that the £94 a week statutory sick pay, universal credit, in London, the maximum family, I think a family of 2 could get with 2 children and 2 adults, is around 1,900 a month. Where you can look at the average rent sometime reaching 1,000, you can see some people are going to be forced into abject poverty. I think also, I'll finish up my day job. I work in social care, and that's an area again with low-paid critical workers, 300,000 on 0-hour contracts, close to 1 million. Other people working in social care, a vast majority again on very low pay. And I think there will be. I mean, I know our Queen will be speaking later. I'm sure people won't be turning over. But there's this rubbish. We're all in it together. Whereas my brother, who works in social care, says, I mean, I think finally people will realise what the imbeciles and incompetents are running this country. I think one thing I'll end on. There's also a reluctance in the trade union movement to actually fight for higher pay. An example in my region, in Hackney, the parking wardens there work for a private company called APCO, won a 50% pay rise. Now, the union Unite has almost kept this a secret, but I think we're getting more and more queries for people who are being forced into work, and that will be the next step. Many millions of workers are at home now, and a lot of employers will be calling them back, especially those who work for local government. There's a lot of people who will be called back. The more and more people go off ill with COVID-19, more and more people will be asked to do critical roles. More and more people will asked to go into social care. And some workers who don't work in parks and gardens and other such will be asked to collect waste. And you've got a lot of workers who obviously see see the sad news of people dying, of bus drivers, etc., and critical workers in social care as the death toll mounts up. And there will be, I believe, there will be more and more unofficial disputes, and also more and more workers individually choosing not to go in. I'll end on that. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thanks so much. Before you go, I just want to ask you one question. Like you talked about how there are a lot of workers at home, but there also are a lot of workers who are taking action. What can these victories, even though they're small, what can these victories do to help strengthen our labor movement after COVID, and to build a stronger labor movement going forward?
I think it will certainly inspire. It'll inspire workers, and they'll see more and more examples of unofficial action. I don't know if I remember the CWU, the postal workers. More and more, there'll be more and more unofficial access as this crisis develops, and the workers reflect. If they didn't believe that the workers could run the country better, and the workers could run the factories and the workplaces better, and the workers could do a better job than the bosses. If anyone who didn't believe that or didn't have any doubt, they only have to see the tragic incompetence that the ruling classes, you know, from whether it's their herd mentality, the lack of PPE, the lack of decent pay, you know, the lack of decent training, the lack of so many things. I think it will convince workers, and I think even anecdotally now, despite the crisis, unions, more people are joining unions. A little example: 6,000 joined the teachers' union, the NUE, and importantly, as my colleague, comrade James Kerr said, 300 of those have become shop stewards themselves. And even in my little branch, we've seen an increase of membership already. And also, it'll be up to the trades union, it'll be up to us to work with those workers, especially in the so-called unorganised section. I think those people will join, and will join us, and will take up our socialist values. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. It was great talking to you. We're going to head over to Northern Ireland with Amy, who's going to tell us a little bit about what worker action looks like over there. Go ahead, Amy.
So just
Amy, I think you have a bad connection. Can you hear me? Okay, Amy, we can't hear you.
Prior to the crisis,
Sorry, Amy, we can't hear you, so I'm just going to move on. I want to take this time real quick, though, to remind people to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook pages, so you can stay connected to the work that we're doing. Next, we're going to go to Pablo, who is a firefighter and a union shop steward in Brussels. Pablo, take it away.
Hi, comrades. I'm Pablo Nains, activist in the Belgian section of the International Socialist Alternative. I've been a firefighter and paramedic for 7 years and shop steward at the Brussels Fire Department since 2 years. As in many other countries, our government did not foresee the crisis and minimize it once it arrived, to turn around by imposing a lockdown, but leaving non-essential companies on the sidelines. Of course, of the the years of austerity made the situation worse, and we even learned that our Minister of Health did not renew the strategic stockpile of masks before the crisis in order to limit spending. Also, unfortunately, the managers of my fire service has had the same attitude as the government, a lack of foresight followed by underestimation and then a paralysis when the crisis began. No measure were taken in terms of protection or compartmentalization between services. We were running straight toward disaster. A week before the first crisis meeting, which took place after the first measures of the government, I sent a letter in the name of my union to our our management to denounce the paralysis and lack of preparation and to propose the outline of an an emergency plan, and we received no response. From them, my colleagues began to organize themselves at the base. We began to rearrange our barracks as best as we could. Several initiatives emerged, and little by little, a group was formed, particularly around the firefighters, nurses, and several shop stewards, including myself, joined this group, which was named Task Force COVID. Within a week, we were able to put the service in order of battle. We created new procedures, found sufficient protective equipment outside, and reorganized some services. The management finally recognized our activity, and we became like the crisis center for the last 3 weeks. As in present time, the Brussels Fire Department is self-sufficient, and we are no longer dependent on materials from state. The management is, of course, taking over. Now the crisis is relatively unleashed, but we keep control over decision and stock equipments from the task force. Also, at the union level, we have also imposed that the management continues the social consultation meetings and that it recognizes all firefighters sick from the COVID-19 as victims of professional disease, and therefore that they continue to receive all their salaries and bonuses. For now, a great deal of anger and frustration has developed among the firefighters, and on the one hand, about our incompetent top leaders, but above all, about the government and the year of austerity policies. The crisis has clearly demonstrated the importance of healthcare and public services to everyone. Now we are preparing for the post-lockdown as soon as we can organize firefighters assemblies, and have already announced that we will participate in the planned demonstration by healthcare struggle, solidarity, and socialism.
Thanks, Paulo. That was great. Next, we have Tino in South Africa, who is a member of the Jiwusa Union. Tino, can you tell us about the situation in South Africa right now?
Thanks, Toya. In South Africa, I think what we have seen happening all over the world with the movement in terms of the epicenters of the virus moving from China to Europe and then to the US. I think what we can expect over here, because of the rate of infection has not yet peaked yet, that the virus, the coronavirus crisis is going to escalate. But what we have seen, in fact, all over the world, with the governments trying to address the crisis by imposing various restrictions to sectors of the economy and limiting the movement of people. We have also seen the government here take the same measures to try and arrest the rate of infection. But what we can see that with the measures that the government has taken is almost a consistency in terms of, on a global scale. We can see that consistently the measures are basically inadequate. They are falling dismally short of addressing the crisis and addressing the plight of the majority of the population in the country. And what we have also seen alongside the introduction to the restrictions to the movement of people, we see that almost overnight they've sneaked in, the establishment here has sneaked in measures to deregulate the economy and virtually abandoning its role to the private sector, the role of the state to the private sector, and strengthening the role of the private sector, whilst at the same time neglecting the concerns of the workers and continuing to insist even workers that do not work in the essential services sector to continue to work so that the monopolies can continue to accumulate their profits. So we can see that what is also happening, it's almost like a global trend that the workers are being asked to work under conditions that are very hazardous, that lack the most basic and logical forms of protection against the spread of the infection. And workers here have begun to resist, these measures in various ways. Workers have acted quite dynamically, in fact, in terms of trying to resist the imposition of these measures. We've seen in a series of wildcat strikes, began just as soon as the lockdown measures were imposed. So workers are continuously trying to are fighting back. They are organizing. They are they are demanding even greater protection, even more benefits. They are linking their struggles with the socio-economic struggles that have been raging on over time. You understand that here in South Africa, it is the most unequal society in the world. The levels of inequality here are shocking. I know they are beyond comprehension. If you look at the amount of wealth that rests in the private hands, yet so many people, over almost 60% of the population, lives in abject poverty. These inequalities have been laid bare by the coronavirus crisis. You have in the healthcare sector, the public healthcare sector has suffered over time, from rampant austerity by the state. It is virtually dysfunctional. On the other hand, you have a private sector that benefits only the few. Only 16% of the population has access to the private sector healthcare. And if you look at the resources that are available to the public sector, you only have 26% of the doctors in the country being employed in the public sector. So those are the inequalities that have been laid bare by the crisis. The crisis also came at a time where there was already an ongoing crisis in the economy, with the unemployment rate reaching almost a level of 30%, meaning that so many workers were already living in destitution, unable basically to make ends meet in terms of having access to food, having access to the resources, to water and sanitation and shelter. Here there's a housing backlog of 2.3 million. There are claims of 2.3 million, outstanding claims of 2.3 million houses that people have been asking from the government to provide for over since the end of apartheid. So you have this raging crisis, and government measures have proven are already proving to be inadequate. I think as seen as in any other part of the world, that the crisis requires the state. It requires the state to take bold and decisive action in order to at least try to avert the impending catastrophe. You also have, on the other end, I think it's important to mention that there are various underlying social and economic factors that allow the coronavirus to spread at an even much more devastating pace here than you would find in much more advanced countries. I think the chronic poverty. You also have the high rates of infection of across the population, the high rates of infection in chronic illnesses such as TB, diabetes, that are likely to affect a large part of the population. So it therefore requires government to take bold and decisive action in order to arrest the crisis. But there is no expectation really on part of workers that government will act on their behalf. I think it has expressed its own intentions, that it is there to cater for the interests of the private sector, of the monopolies that provide food and basic services, that are already amassing a lot of profits and profiteering from the crisis. It's almost as if they were waiting for the coronavirus pandemic to hit the shores of the country. And they've moved in quickly to position themselves to amass the crisis, the demands in the basic, the already existing demands in basic goods and services such as food, sanitation. They are taking full advantage of the fact that the state is wholly unprepared to provide basic protection to healthcare workers, to the majority of the population, as a result of the fact that the state itself is on the verge of bankruptcy. It has not been able to, in fact, if you look at the past month when they announced the budget, where it was evident that the corona pandemic was going to be a global pandemic, they were in fact introducing budget cuts to the healthcare, to the public healthcare sector, further exacerbating the crisis in that sector already, and the fact that it has been dysfunctional for some time. So workers already know that the state is not equipped to deal with the crisis, to take the bold measures that are required. For instance, the state can expropriate the wealth that already lies in the private capital. Almost $100 billion lies in the hands of a very few and minority of the population in the country. You also have these monopolies that are providing what the government regards essential services. It would be logical for the government to in fact nationalize the healthcare sector or the private hospitals in order to be able to provide adequate healthcare to all, in order to also to provide for the measures that have been recommended, that have proven to be effective in combating the virus, such as mass testing, mass access to to facilities that have ventilators and so on. So they've not shown that they are prepared to take those necessary steps when the crisis escalates, and it is already escalating. So workers have been demanding almost on a day-to-day basis, demanding the delivery of basic services. So they are fully aware that the government is wholly incapable of providing these essential services that they need to at least stand a fighting chance to avoid the catastrophe that the pandemic poses to the overwhelming majority of the population in the country. We are making demands that are in sync with what workers have been saying over time, that government must provide healthcare to all. And this is only possible when the provision of healthcare is not for profit. The provision of access to water, to housing, and the basic necessities to live a dignified life cannot be made under the premise of profit making, as the government is already doing. That is not possible. So workers are going to are already accelerating the call for the state to provide what we expect to happen in the coming months and weeks, is that as the crisis deepens in terms of government's failure to respond to the crisis, what we expect to see is that workers will begin to accelerate their demands with an even greater confidence and intensity, will begin to organize in their communities. You have a large population that is unemployed, that is not going to receive its wages at the end of the month, that is not going to receive any income at the end of this month. We expect those workers to begin to organize amongst themselves, to begin to respond to the crisis that is going to hit a working class and the poor communities the hardest. So that is the context in which the coronavirus pandemic is playing out in South African society. But we already see also across the continent that the chronic crisis of poverty and underdevelopment actually creates the conditions, it natures the conditions for the spread of the virus. It natures the that it is foreseeable that we are going to see the crisis even becoming much worse than it has already been in the historically developed countries, in Europe and in the US. I think I'll end there for now.
Thank you so much, Tino. And I mean, it's obvious now, as you were explaining, the inequalities that have existed for a long time are just completely exacerbated by this crisis. And the fact that the capitalists, the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, the 1%, whatever we call them, they have the wealth to fix crises like this. They've had the wealth for a long time. And that's why workers need to form our own organizations so that we can fight back against these inequalities and fight for a more just society, a socialist society, one that has a planned economic system so we can deal with these types of crises. So I encourage you to donate to the International Socialist Alternative, an organization that is working tirelessly to unite workers globally, give resources where needed to help build and sustain movements to fight against capitalism. Our last speaker is in Austria. Her name is Sonia. Take it away, Sonia.
Thanks, Tara. I must say I feel really honored to speak after all the reports I've just heard, because I think that the current crisis shows both. It shows the worst, but it also shows the best. I mean, it shows the rounded out inability of capitalism and of the ruling class, because the crisis touches actually all effects, all aspects of life. We have a crisis in the health and in the health sector. And I mean, then explained, I mean, how decades of cuts have actually killed his colleagues. We have a deep crisis in the world economy, which is triggered by COVID-19, but it is based in the fundamental contradictions of capitalism. And the crisis that is going to come is most likely to be compared with the one of the 1920s, with brutal working conditions and millions, actually millions of millions, being laid off and sent into unemployment. It's also a crisis for women, because a lot of more extra unpaid labor is put on the shoulders of women, and on top of this, an increase in domestic violence. It is a crisis of the capitalist institutions, especially the EU, and leads to increased nationalism by the ruling class. And it is, of course, a deep crisis of bourgeois democracy. And some might argue that more people die from a normal flu or other diseases, from military conflicts, drug abuse, or from starvations. And all these does not prove that COVID-19 is not dangerous. It just proves that capitalism fails on so many different fields. It just underlines the point that people do not die from a virus, but because of an economic system that exploits the planet at every occasion and at every cost. It is a system that puts profits over human lives. The current crisis comes on top of the climate crisis, a crisis that made clear to millions around the globe that this system is the source of the problem and not its solutions. And as we see the deepening crisis around COVID-19, and as the capitalists see the crisis of their whole system, the governments try to react, but all of them are too late and too little, as Tino explained. We've just heard examples from all over the world where it was the working class that pushed and was fed up with the way and incapability of the governments, like Ryan explains, forced the governments to take measures with strikes and walkouts to make them do what they should do, at least in the end. But we also see that the ruling class uses this situation for attacks on workers' rights and on democratic rights. And all this is very frightening if we see the lockdown and all the measures are taken. But the attacks on the working class, these are no sign of strength of the ruling class, but it is a sign of their weakness. They are so desperate, trying different measures, economic measures, to limit the effects of the economic downturn. And it also shows that if it's necessary for them, then they are quite flexible in the measures they take in the attempt to rescue their system. It also proves that the resources are there, and they always have been there. The money is in the accounts of the billionaires and of the big companies. And this is wealth that we all have created, and they have been stealing from us over decades. We see also that the ruling class is divided about what to do between different countries, but also within the different countries. We see these tensions, conflicts, and even splits within the ruling classes in China, in the US, in Russia, in Brazil, and many other countries. And this is just one of the characteristics of a revolutionary situation, that the ruling class is split and does not know what to do. At this moment that we are speaking, most of the governments seem to be stable. But this is a little bit like the situation in 1914, at the beginning of the First World War, when these governments seemed to be stable. But it was just some years after this that we had the revolutionary events of 1917 and 1918, where in Russia, the revolution was successful due to the existence of a revolutionary party that armed the uprising with a program and a strategy. The dictatorial measures, like the ban on strikes in Italy or the ruling by decree in Hungary, this shows that the ruling class has learned their history lessons and that they are frightened of the anger and the fight back of the working class. Because the other side to the current situation of the total failure of the ruling class, the other side to this is the actions of the working class. And we have heard a number of very impressive examples in the last hour about this activity. We hear numerous examples of solidarity and sacrifice of ordinary people all around the world. We learn about the collective actions of the working class to fight for and organize safety, which the ruling class is not prepared to organize and guarantee. And we all have heard in the past the argument that a socialist society would not work because people are too selfish for this. And what we see around the globe in solidarity, activity, and coming together of people, of feeling responsible, this just proves that a society based on solidarity and on the talents and the abilities of the working class is absolutely possible. The activities that we see by the working class taken, these should be organized by the trade unions. But the problem is that the leadership of the trade union is not doing what they should do and what they were elected by the membership. And this shows, as Tasha has explained, the importance to organize on the rank and file level within and around the trade unions to force the union leadership into action and into resistance. We also are very impressed about the talents and innovations done by the working class, where people start to change to production to what is necessary to fight the virus. Examples that have been given by Pablo. We have heard about examples from all over the world of innovations of cheap, easy, and available DIY ventilator systems. And this is just a tiny little glimpse of what would be possible. What would be possible in a society that is not limited through the chains of capitalism. Just imagine if no patents and no private limitations would exist on research, but if all resources would have been prepared and used in time for testing. There are also various examples of companies changing production now, but they're only limited and they only do it where it is profitable for them. So imagine if production would be democratically planned and organized and could therefore on a mass scale be shifted to produce masks, disinfection, protection, and ventilators. Imagine if not profit, but the needs of people would run the world. And this is not a dream. This is a necessity. It's a necessity for the future of humanity. COVID-19 will not be the end of humanity. It is capitalism that is the major threat to all of us. So for dignity, for our health, for a decent living, it is necessary to get rid of this unhealthy and toxic capitalist system. Let's get the fight for a socialist society viral. There is a future worth to fight for. Join in our struggle. Join the ranks of the International Socialist Alternative.
Thank you so much, Sonia. So please like, subscribe, comment on our video, follow us on Facebook, and like Sonia said, please join International Socialist Alternative so we can link up and fight against capitalism together. Thanks. Tune in next week. Bye.